early voting has begun in the state of Georgia as well as other states. And, of course, Georgia is one of the big swing states. For here in Tennessee, starts tomorrow. Georgia, as we know, historically has voted Republican in all but 2 of the last elections in the last 4 decades. That's for president. And the last time was Bill Clinton. And then, of course, Joe Biden took Georgia for the first time in a very long time. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with Atlanta. If you look at that, there's always a blue dot and a big sea of red. That's what it's like in Atlanta. Look, where we are in Tennessee, it's like Nashville or Memphis. There are blue dots in primarily red states. Now, for a place like Tennessee, likely those still go red. They still are Republican centered. Georgia's a little bit different because so many people live in Atlanta. And so much has changed in Atlanta in terms of Hollywood moving in and everything happening that you have a total shift in really the landscape of Georgia.
I'm usually the voter that votes election day, but this time I'm voting early and I'm taking my kids, their wives, and we have probably 15 to 18 people coming with us early voting.
I think that's a good plan. I plan on early voting this year. I've kind of gone back and forth. I like that. I know a lot of people like the electricity on election day. That's sort of fun to go and experience it. Because it is a little like, it's an American tradition to go on election day, vote, and get your sticker and all that. If I get my sticker tomorrow, I'm walking around going, okay, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to hold on to this thing for 2.5 weeks? But I think Michael is right, which is they're telling everyone to go vote early. You never know what's going to happen. He's in the state of Florida. We know the hurricane season is happening. We've seen what's happened in North Carolina. You never know what could stop you from being there on election day. Traffic, 4-hour lines. People have very busy lives. Stuff gets in the way. So as much as it is important to go vote, it is more important to make sure that you have the opportunity to vote. Like I said, early voting opens tomorrow here in the state of Tennessee. Do I think I'm going to vote tomorrow? Probably not. But will I try to do it before we get to election day? Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are some of those rules in here. It says, I'll pull those up, where you can at least vote for the next 16 days in the state of Georgia, with some counties even offering an extra voting day on Sunday, November 1st. And of course, the following Tuesday, a week from then, we will have the general election. And it's going to be crazy, and it's going to get wild. And what I really hope and pray is that we have some answers fairly quickly, that this isn't another situation where we're 2 or 3 months from now still talking about it. But it very well might be. I think after 2020, all bets are off. And of course, we all, if you were there, if you remember, I deal with a lot of students now, so that they weren't there for it because they're all in their early 20s. But you may remember, the Bush-Gore years or the Bush-Gore election, and that also strung on for weeks and weeks.
Me and my husband, we always early vote. We always walk to the place and walk in. We do it every voting season.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. And I like some people hey, we bring our kids to do that. Some area school gets out, not in I think if probably some public schools that are used as polling places. If you have the opportunity to take your kids, I always enjoyed that as a kid, to go and to learn. They used to have setups where you could even pretend to vote in the corner. I don't think they still do that anymore. It's much more efficient. This was when it was still paper ballots, and you would go and they'd even taught you how to do it. Here's how you punch out the spot, or here's how you fill in the. Those are things that we're losing a little bit in America, especially when educating our children. And I know things are going to change. Obviously, it's changed dramatically since I was a kid, when it started as paper ballots, moved to digital. Most of my voting life has been digital now. But I do think there should be that education of, here's what we're doing, here's why it's important. Teach your kids, your grandkids, here's why we do this, how you decide who you're going to vote for. We used to do kids pick the president. We used to do that at school. They used to do that on Nickelodeon. They still may. When I worked there, they were doing kids pick the president. And they didn't always, a lot of times it did, because your parents influenced who you'd vote for, but it didn't always end up being the person who won. Always pretty interesting. I think we need to do that. Keep educating. Big non-endorsement. What was that? Well, this came from the Arab American PAC in Michigan. And they announced that they will not be supporting Vice President Harris or Donald Trump. And why? Of course, because of their stance on Israel. Because as much as the Harris administration, potentially, I'll call it that now, why not? The Harris administration, because it's not really the Biden administration anymore, Harris wants to distance themselves from Israel. They've also found themselves in a weird situation where they're trying to both make sure their Jewish base is happy, who traditionally votes blue, while also making sure their far left, squad style group is also happy. But what happened? It did not work. This is from the Arab American Political Action Committee. They sent a statement that this year we face a choice of two candidates who are harming our communities here and our families and friends in our homelands. We simply cannot give our vote to either Democrat Kamala Harris or Republican Donald Trump, who blindly supports the criminal Israeli government led by far-right extremists, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And of course, this comes after also one of the squad. Let me find that one. Yeah, here we go. Democrat member of the squad, Rashida Tlaib, also called Benjamin Netanyahu, just a few weeks ago, a genocidal maniac who is burning people alive, bombing hospitals, starving people, killing aid workers. That is what's happening from that side. So you can't make that side happy by saying, hey, we're still going to support Israel. We're going to send troops. We're going to send supplies. It's another one of those situations where they try to have their cake and eat it too. But of course, we all know the good guys in this, but for some reason, they're having to try to, kowtow to both. And this is what ends up happening. You have a situation where, look, I'm happy they didn't endorse Harris, but I'm not happy for the reason. I'm happy they didn't endorse Trump too, by the way. I don't necessarily want their support if they're this aggressive. That's a ridiculous thing to ask for. But what I don't want is essentially hate for the Jewish people and hate for Israel to continue on like it's been happening all throughout the last 12 months. I mean, obviously it's been happening for millennia, but for the last 12 months more aggressively here in this country. A lot of news, Jeff, coming out of obviously our own world in terms of politics, where you have a situation where, of course, the squad members who have never held back against their dislike of the state of Israel and, of course, of Prime Minister Netanyahu. But you had Rashida Tlaib calling Prime Minister Netanyahu in a tweet yesterday, in an X post, if you will, a genocidal maniac who's burning Palestinians alive, bombing hospitals, starving people, and killing aid workers. When will our country stop funding the madness? When? This also comes from a moment where you have the Arab American PAC say we're not endorsing either of the candidates because they're both pro-Israel. When you have those kind of counterbalance statements, it is a troubling time, but I wanted to get your thoughts.
I'm glad that Rashida Tlaib is modifying her rhetoric. That's really nice to hear. Look, the truth is think back 10 years ago, this kind of rhetoric would have been unimaginable, but we have lurched so far. So I want to say the real problem is that there are not a handful of genocidal, Jew-hating terrorist shills who are sitting members of Congress. The real problem is that they've been normalized and embraced as opposed to stigmatized and ostracized by the Democrats as a party. That they're bringing into our country waves of jihadi maniacs who are voting people like this into office, and that they feel so strong that rather than say, look, we've made gains here, they know, these maniacs, that the more anti-America, the more anti-Semitic they are, the more anti-Christian they are, the more direct they are about it, the more they refuse to play ball, the more the Democrats will kowtow to them. At some point, this has to stop because it's destroying our country. It's making it so dangerous.